Continuing after, having gone through love and compassion, and then we have bodhicitta. So it says in the white flower of compassion, if a bodhisattva mahasattva is endowed with a single dharma, they hold the entirety of the Buddha's dharma in their hands. And what is that single dharma? It is great compassion. Nyima Zomson Chart la Furate, Nasa Sama Cha, the Chaza Simple Chok, Moro Top. What a chidu, then you can on Dama, Pomotric, Dama Zar Simple Shoe, the Nando, the Yamang Hakomados, then the Chotam Chicken Nello Soto. What and Richon do attend to the Ningel, then Chon Water. So Ningje Latini Chu Tamchig in Nail Madame Chaza Simon Chok Top Sarawa. To do then Damu and Romo Pomatru, Damazar Simple Mamboje, Dan those. In among a Yaboko Mados. That's that they show them Nero talk. What to Chon Water, Chaza Simon or Tom, then show them Nero talk. And so, Lord Jigten Sungpan says that it's really actually compassion, that through the power of compassion, one can realize the meaning of Mahamudra. And this is how it actually occurred for him. So he, at one, in his life story, it is told that he contracted leprosy. At one point in his life, he became very, very ill. And he was concerned because leprosy is highly contagious. So he realized that he needed to go to a solitary place to die, because if he remained, among kind of the village or monastery or in the company of others, that they could contract this terrible illness and contract leprosy themselves. So he went into solitude, particularly to the cave of Echung cave, and he sealed up the wall of his cave, with mud and stones, and he decided that there, he would die. And there was a tanka of Chenrezig in his cave, and he, decided to prostrate. And at first, when he first prostrated, he was really depressed. He was feeling really sad, like, oh, this is so terrible that I have contracted this awful illness. Now is the end of my life. I'm not able to fulfill my vision. And so he was really depressed. But then the second prostration, he thought, but I've been so fortunate in my life. I've actually met, such an incredibly kind and realized spiritual teacher, Mahamudra, who is like the Buddha in person. And I've received really such profound pith instructions. So, I'm actually, fine. I have everything that I need. I couldn't ask for more. I've been so fortunate in this life. But then he thought with compassion about sentient beings and thinking of all of those who don't have such incredibly fortuitous circumstances, that they haven't met such a profoundly powerful spiritual teacher like Mahamudra. They haven't had this opportunity to connect with the Dharma and the profound pith instructions. And so he gave rise to really immense compassion for sentient beings. And then that became, his meditative absorption of compassion that lasted, for 3 days. And in that period of 3 days, he was completely recovered from leprosy, was completely healed. And he fully realized Mahamudra in a way that he had not quite realized before. And so he said after this experience that it really was the cause of compassion that led him to realize the true nature of all phenomena, that although he had received all of these profound pith instructions from Mahamudra, he didn't quite get the meaning, until this experience, and that was what really led to the full development of his realization.
Tene ma na kurwa dungar janso chains ma da mar wasa dan kurwa taso tsama na dan kurwe dungar janso na ta chain di oris chains and da janso na ma long de ke charwa wa ten hong de dute dewan do jans dewan do dor suna nga so suna rang jan sama dewan do khin barwa dewan man do nya su je yo mare wa te dewan do jan deve julan dungar julnes dewan do ja dungar ju te kar se mege ma bo rufi do nga na so 이 메게 주테 동아리 거와 와 동아 줄 쪽거래스 된 리블 된 리블테 카레 동아 쪽거래스 주 메게 주난 리블스 동아 쪽거래스 대본에 탈모스 와테 다본야 탑시스네 하코 말했어 와테 하코 말했어 와테 게베이냐 탐바선 루케 신 야고 신요 말했어 심찬상마 랑도르네 되냐 랑와다 토르자요라 되냐게 게베이냐 Landor ne tonya gebe nya tham de ruke zi ndo ya bo sin yo ma re smart so wa te ndu de lam ya ya ta ba jin chen ken yo ma re wa te me du te de so nying ji sam de so so mai le chi ma chou lu ha pu dang jo le te cham da nying ji se gom go re
Make chu
mai le chi ma chou lu la ha pu dang
lu la
lu la wa te ne 어떤 텐들 시대 공고래 송도와 어떤에 가서 지름을하래 배요와 가서 참탄인게 공공니 사고 참탄인게 뭐뭐 공이 송도와 참탄인게 공공니 랑연지바지 네티 랑드 현지야지 스티스 공다 랑연지바지 송스 랑레 세제 현레 세제 텐지야지 스티스 어다 텐루제 참니게 공도나 텐데 가서 차단 똑바트 마총도 그래 차단 똑바트 미나데 소소줄라 노셈 요마레 텐두 제 편한 톱치 투야라 용거와 어텐두 소보테 제 가서 다제 파르소테 제 참니게 공마토도야 magic the Dorje Lamna, Pechanda Shana, magic Dorjalana, Telpa, Dorje Lanja, Jagrawang also.
Memda Jagare.
Oh, Land, Tasa Jamatom, Dragmatico, Napam Rasons and Gra, Mare, not Chon Rasco, Dubotas laughing, Lama upon and Dragmasons and Gra, Mare.
But young Menda,
Menda.
Menda.
Manda. Me pardon, and Tasa Jamatomna.
Oh, Linda.
Swords the Duboje Launa till Lantil dose for Lamatona. Then Dragmati Tang, Jomas or some Gra. When they sent Dickum around also.
Yeah.
The Chamnije. Not the Jojo now, your Shedan on Camina, Soba Soligums. He then look at me, Soba Gums to some Yoa. Roa. Or then the that's a concept of the Chamnije as a gum. These aren't the Chamnije Mentucho Jungstana, Sosok Chamnije that he Sosok the Nava Mendoza. That's a younger one also. They own a Sosogan, the Soba and the Soso, sometimes the Madia Sonia and Jungerwa, or than a Cham Soba is gum. Or that Richie Tom nothing around to Devoyore. Terwa.
So, as it goes on in the text to say that all mother sentient beings and samsara, they're bound, in this ocean of suffering, and even though they wish to be happy, there's nobody who doesn't want to be happy. All sentient beings, without exception, they wish to be happy. But even though they wish to be happy, they don't understand how to create the causes of true happiness. Instead, they chase after causes thinking that those causes will lead to happiness, but they actually result in their own suffering. And so again and again, they unknowingly create the causes of suffering, not understanding that the true cause of happiness is cultivating wholesome qualities and practicing virtue. That when the the result of virtue is well-being and happiness, and the result of suffering, or the cause of suffering, is negativity and non-virtue. And so not understanding how to abandon the causes of suffering, thinking that those causes of suffering are actually will lead to happiness, they create the causes of their own suffering. And they don't have, so many don't have the Dharma, they don't have spiritual teachers to point out to them, what is the right path, what it is that should be taken up, and what it is that should be avoided, and this, how to actually appropriately pursue the path of true happiness. And so when we contemplate in this way, then we really can have a sense of compassion for sentient beings who blindly wander in samsara and continuously, suffer, not understanding how to create the true causes of happiness. And so it says we should meditate in this way, cultivating compassion, until we, in such a way that it's really visceral, we really feel it, and we even, shed tears to the point that we actually shed tears, and the hairs of our body stand on end. So until you kind of get goosebumps and start to cry. So this is the way then to meditate on compassion. And Milarepa said, by meditating again and again on love and compassion, I forgot about grasping to self and others, or I forgot the fixation of self and others. And so in this way, when we meditate on love, it just naturally pacifies that mind of dualistic fixation, self-grasping, and also, the concept of others and the concept of enemies and so forth. And as a result, the mind that is an overall beneficial intent or an altruistic mind state naturally arises. And so if somebody who doesn't have this practice of meditating on love and compassion, then there's always there's something, to be gained by like one-upping somebody else. So for instance, if somebody says something that is like, negative or triggering to you, and then there's this feeling like if you didn't get the chance to like, say something clever back, or really kind of get them back, then there's a feeling of like, oh, I didn't, there's some regret there because you feel like you were insulted, and then the feeling is that you want to like insult or harm that person in return. But that's a completely mistaken way of thinking. And so it really actually to change that attitude of having the aversion toward the enemy and instead seeing those enemies or difficult people as real opportunities to deepen our practice. So like in the Bodhicharya Avatara, it says, if there isn't anyone around who makes us angry, if there isn't anyone around who really, irritates us or infuriates us, then there's no object for patience. We don't have any way to practice patience. And so the enemies provide this wonderful opportunity for developing patience. With, continually attending to the cultivation of love and compassion, continually practicing patience in the face of difficulties and hardship and difficult people, then we really will develop in our practice. So then next, following love and compassion, then we have the cultivation of bodhicitta. And there are two types of bodhicitta. There's the aspiration bodhicitta and application bodhicitta.
Mobe chancho sem de on dal damar chibe da nobar chibe gate say wa what nobar chibe gate tarwa samchi chibe war to jobar chiba chibe now cho ju jinhor men tu cho do ba dong wa ta yang de ti men tu cho do myan sang ma dal damar chibe da nobar chibe gate tarwa samchi chen ba yo men tu cho do myan sang ma dang te pa ma zo chibe nam ka da nyam be sim chen yo ra nam ka da nyam be sim chen tam chi wa den kurwa dong ar jang so fa der ba chi bo zang ta jidang arang su changshio xian ni du ni la bu ro sammo da we ju xia zai jia qian ju bei ju xia zai yo ba
za mo ta wei ju dang
jia qian ju bei ju ta nga zo ne jia qian ju bei ju so won xia xiu sa ren arang su lo pong tong min ma chong de wa wa de zo won ran de xia xiu sa ren ka zhen mo bei sim chi te drivel tam ja wa la yo wa Jubes simchi te jul tham jawase. What in do that angazoda, teach some tatani mobatela, tesoya, dongar na the simjan samchi. Juba jul tham java. So the tatangazoni, the tata tian sari, that's some jan samchi part, kurwa tart via chijin la pura. What it so what it. The dra the some tart chigi si ya te dang azu drill tam java tarwa tam chi be kompa thoba chigi
So first there's the aspiration bodhicitta. So this is really embodied or exemplified by the prayer that we recite. It's always the first prayer that we recite, may all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they achieve happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly may they achieve complete and unsurpassed perfect awakening. And so this is the aspiration that all sentient beings may be liberated from the suffering of samsara and that they may reach the state of awakening. And here again, placing first and foremost all those who are particularly difficult or so-called enemies, and again, that using that as the object, then principle among all sentient beings are also first and foremost one's own mother and father. So with this aspiration that one's all mother sentient beings together with one's own mother and father and all harm doers may reach the state of fully perfected awakening. And so these two types of bodhicitta, there's also kind of the two streams of practice or lineage in terms of this. There's the lineage of profound view and the lineage of vast conduct. And so we typically kind of, so the lineage of profound view is connected mainly with Nagarjuna, and the lineage of vast conduct with Ganga. And so we fall more into the lineage of vast conduct. And so there's first the aspiration bodhicitta, which is the commitment is actually based on the fruition. So the kind of the objective in the aspiration is the fruition of Buddhahood. And then the application bodhicitta, or practice bodhicitta, is the commitment with regard to the cause. So we're committing ourselves to the causes or the practice, the conduct that leads to that fruition. And so that's, first aspiration is the commitment to the fruition, achieving the fruition of Buddhahood for all sentient beings, and the cause, the application is commitment to the cause, the conduct that leads to that fruition. And so the aspiration is, that all sentient beings may be liberated and achieve the fruition of complete awakening. And to achieve that cause, that fruition, we will exert ourselves in the path of wholesome practice or virtuous practice. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Al-Shawarwe.
Jiwa.
Ale ya tene dangaranso o tene tada juba changjo sem era moba changjo sem terwa tela tatris kurwe dungar janso le majarwa samtian tamti pa jarwa chijins te nyomambo chingwa le major de le samti churwa chigins dangalo nyomambo chingwa ti chordo da niento de ran sanje te tikpa chimbo wo ndo yo maris te wo chungwa chigins o tene changjo sem ba to nyangan le mandeba 그래서 용스다 특별 진보 양양 용스 나바 지기 잠어타테 탐지하는 거다. 율 안디울 탐자와서 라서 와치지 샘지고래.
슈바 잠차와 마레베. 줄라 잠차와 마레베.
조바 타타테 모바라와.
디 모바라.
네 모바 문투리 누가 토요 말다라.
다스.
와서 샘지바차 스테네 전 다는 말로想的 对，就是说嘛，我就是强调身体就那个些，可别总那点呗，让他就是，要不咱们这些就讲的，今天他们那去恰恰就是些种，我他强调身体，那说强调身，要不是的，这强调身不懂吧？去强调身体呢，这突些强调身把事给的，我今天他的没他们恰恰些那学个的，我他从个的种多，强把就强调身别就这一趟的那也从。देखिए लाभ चुपे लाभ में तो न्यूज़ ना नमी पर तो बच्चों जो उम्र ज़ाबस वो तो ने ज़ा चंबा शुभिन दो जो सोरेस ताने रिस मामू यो मारे ता तुझो शिरा मतो या तने चंबा शुभे तो या मामू यो मारे तने चंबा शुभिन दो से थी ना कर ना चांचो संबे के ने इंसान क्या है वो ने मज़ा ना रे गाइन से ने जेला ना गियर टू करवा 다 저걸 맡아 해야 말. 전에 장초 선배께 주제 있다 대나스. 쟁년 송좀 저 말이스. 다 장초 선배 주제 되나 인간 송좀 저 말이스. 대가르스나 다 장초 선배 요르 나나미 상지야. 지게레스. 주지보데 다 삼바 좀 써봐. 장초 선배레스. 어디 삼바 장초 좀 써봐. 我听对的年轻进步可以进步的是，我听对我让说强调什么可以进步的，就当强调什么些的，今天中国强调什么当人间才的一种劳工节呢？人间强调什么当人间才的意思？我做过的强调什么的，人间什么样的没关系吧？写了做的商界的没关系，得强调什么那个的是。我听。
Simchen la mikba. Dang Gyaltsen zoksang. Yeah.
就人家什么样的没关系吧？写了做这样的没吧？做什么样的商界出也怎么有吧？我这了，他那强调什么是个的是？我这呢，当然说成就过强调什么，当然他是看没把强调什么的。我这其他呢？我知道他强调什么的开心不的是我那说强调什么呢？商界用过嘛是吧？很多那种我都得怕强调什么，像用几天这边年头上把卡了就，我这样的强调什么商界用过嘛的，说但说我的商界他们强调什么出口的，我这强调什么的开始解决强把的听解说，听点强把解说，强把点的人解的，人解点的强调什么解的。我理解，我说啊，我谈这个事。
So with the aspiration bodhicitta, we make the commitment, or there's the commitment to achieve the fruition, which is, that we will liberate all those who have not been liberated, or all those who are bound. So all beings in sentient in samsara. So we will first, it's referring to like those who are suffering in the lower realms, that they will be brought into the higher realms, and then those who are caught, or bound by the chains of samsara, that we will free them from those chains, so that then they can become free from samsara, or achieve liberation. And then those who are bound for liberation, the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, but don't have the resolve of bodhicitta, then there's the commitment to endow them, literally it is said to endow them with breath, because they are without breath. So those who are without breath, we will give breath to. And then all beings, or those bodhisattvas, then we will place in the state of fully perfected awakening. So like are those bound or those on the path of bodhisattvas who are bound for unsurpassed awakening, we will help them to achieve that unsurpassed goal, or that unsurpassed level of full awakening. And so this then also it becomes the aspiration bodhicitta. And so as it says also in the Bodhicharya Avatara, the moment you give rise to bodhicitta, the miserable fetters of samsara's prison become unbound. And just as proclaimed by the children of the victorious ones, you become an object of veneration for the gods and humans of the world. So once one really gives rise to bodhicitta in the mind stream, as a result of generating bodhicitta, one becomes a bodhisattva when true bodhicitta is born. And in being a bodhisattva, one becomes elevated, above ordinary beings, and it becomes an object of prostration for gods and humans. So also, as it says in the sutra requested by Maitreya, essentially, if there's one thing, like if a bodhisattva is endowed with one thing, that one thing becomes the cause to forever protect them from rebirth in the lower realms. And it leads to unsurpassed, fully complete and perfect enlightenment. And that one thing is bodhicitta. So in that way, it's very important that we really apply ourselves in the cultivation of bodhicitta. Lord Jigten Sumgön defines bodhicitta as being twofold, or like the two aspects of bodhicitta are compassion and wisdom. Compassion, which the objective of which, or the object of which, is sentient beings, and wisdom, the object of which is perfected awakening or enlightenment. And so bodhicitta is especially important and precious, above and beyond any of the other qualities that we work to cultivate. As is said in the sutras, if there is no bodhicitta, then there is no appearance of Buddhas in this world, because the Buddhas arise from bodhicitta. It is bodhicitta that is the direct cause of Buddhahood. And so if without bodhicitta, then there is no path, there is no possibility for complete awakening. And so to develop bodhicitta, it is something that happens in progressive stages. So we begin, just as has been explained here, first by developing love. As the meditative absorption of love is cultivated, then we move to the development of compassion. As that is cultivated, then we move to the cultivation of bodhicitta, the two types of bodhicitta. So now we can conclude here with the aspiration bodhicitta for today, and we'll address some of the questions that were given. So let's read the first one. This is the first time I'm seeing these. In the four powers of Vajrasattva, purification, the question is about the fourth power of resolve, not to commit the negative action again. If one knows that one will do the negative activity again, what to do? For example, strong negative thoughts about bad people or lustful storylines in the mind. Do you keep forming the fourth power of resolve over and over? So, dini di Dorje nanga, Dorje rawa. Dini Nyima di yangchar chegimin dam chawa yorwa. Yena yang pena nga tenda nang shing dam cha che go samgi yona yang. Yena yang pacher yangchar ma che ya kapore ha pona. Pena flakpar tu trawo yena pena rangi sim nanga o denda trawa di rapa dang trawa. Pena rangi sim nangla de pena megawa chen che yona kongla sherang takar langi yona nga sherang langi min de damcha chena yene yang pache sherang yangchar lang sigire habo beorwa yangna nga de chaksim chegi min rawo yang damcha langna yene yang pache yangchar chegire ha kona tene gari che ya yore de yangchar de gito Gong gogiyorebe kandeche.
That's terwa. Jatan de Chinchi domsen mina madabe de la yora. Chinchi domsen min defa taw mare se chami raga song yora. Chami song re ande da. De reju tenru re srwa. Yina da zenga so mombe hwang song de du. Tenru ze shor song na ze an samsang tenru cha song na rwa. Lam sang so yakwa chi rwa. Wo chen xie hua yu chi. Wo tenru chi na pen to re samdo. Kasa na ten men da nge chi to gu ma re zang yu xia na. De do du me ma de ro ge re samdo da. Je tang wo da tenru chi han de sa re. Wo se an samsang da tenru cha zi re nga zong ku re na ji de le rwa. Wo ten du da le ka mang bo yo re ten ne. te yu dun samsang te ru cha misi ba ma re te ina o da so so ke kan tu to ze chi ma to wa chi ro wa yang sa ma chi ze chi song na te han zi ze du ko tan dai ma song na te sam o so ya fan da chi o te ne me ze an ma mo ba jie un da ti dom se te ma ji na de sa re sam na te lo da ha ra ha te yo ma re s te ni so so ze kan tu to chi ji na kom na la wa men jo ma ngo te kan ya yo ma yin te kom son kale this is mal chung rose gerwa so be son chi jena wa be son chi de kali na so kom de le ka so kom ge wa das the part that as a better also Shedan does alone. Shedan by Yaya some of the down to Jenna, the change for you. Shedan see on some of the Eugene. This is Papa comes on to Yard and Rosigawa. Or Tendun does on the Zana.
Sure. So in the 4 powers, in the practice of Vajrasattva or purification, the question is about the 4th power, which is the power of resolve, the commitment not to do the negative action again. But if one knows that one will do the negative activity again, what to do? So for example, if there's a strong negative thoughts about bad people or lustful storylines in the mind, do you keep forming the 4th power of resolve over and over? So to begin with, Drupon Rinpoche said, it's important not to disregard the 4th power because you think that you can't achieve it. Because, if you don't have that, then, the 4 powers aren't complete. Yeah, so if you don't have, Chagme Raga says that if you don't have that 4th power especially, not to commit the negativity again, then the purification doesn't happen. So it's like actually contingent upon that one in particular. But even if we know that it might be difficult to get there right away, it's really important to keep the strong aspiration going, and to keep mindfulness and mindful awareness, to really be conscientious and mindful. That will be really of great assistance in really finally breaking that habit. So, for instance, if you commit the negativity again, or if you, kind of lose your commitment, and it happens again, then to notice when it happens and to immediately, have like the mind of remorse or confession right as that happens. And then there's real benefit again in really maintaining mindfulness, not to be careful not to, but then because if you sort of disregard the 4th power and think, well, of course it's going to happen again. I know it's going to happen again, so I can't really, like, in all sincerity, really have this 4th power. Then it will actually only become kind of like an excuse, and it could end up causing it to just continue or to get worse and worse. So it's important to really still have that resolve regardless. And of course, we're in samsara, we make mistakes, we have a lot of afflictions that arise, we have a lot of activities, and things, responsibilities and things that are demanding our attention. And so, of course, it's not impossible that we won't, break that commitment or transgress that commitment. But still, we try to the best of our ability to maintain it. And when we're not able to keep that commitment, then we recognize that and we feel a sense of remorse about that. We know that, that it's not okay. And we make the aspiration, once again, we have the resolve, and we make the aspiration, to really refrain or really get to the point where this just isn't happening any longer. To the best of our ability. And so just as said, everything happens through habituation over time. Anything that we strive to accomplish is accomplished through practice, through habituation. And so if we continually practice, again and again, little by little in this way, and really make a sincere effort, then eventually over time we will be able to really keep, our commitment. Yeah. So like in this example of if there's somebody who makes you angry and you have anger arise, then every time, to apply the 4 powers or to apply, the practice in that moment, then little by little it will improve. So then the next question is, could you explain why prana, bindu, and nadis are the secret refuge? They're just our subtle body. Why can they become our refuge? then it's salung tigle de sangwe kyamdo rewa. Then it di kyamdo yempagi jumsing gare de penangatsu lugi then de young salung de yapokogamedo.
That answer is za long to nyamla china then on sanji gerwa. Chancho sem tang de with za long to nyamla china. Or the sanji short then the jamdro silap shosaris.
So the reason why the prana bindu and nadis, or what I think I originally translated in English as the channels, winds, and drops, the reason why they're the secret refuge is because when we practice channels, winds, and drops together with bodhicitta, that practice leads to awakening, and so that is how it is our secret refuge. And then once we're Buddhas, we're protected from samsara. So then the third question is, if we do not have many external enemies, other people, but we have some inner demons, characteristics, obscurations, blocking our path, can we imagine this part of ourselves and generate compassion for that? So then the chitang, the chilo la dra shira mena, dra making yena yang pena rangi sem nang la nune dinda de namto dang new momba dang dripa mambo yona, then the young lam gagi yona, so gi lam. The drawaway lam la barche zogiorwa. So then it did so la ningje gomna. Then it dindra nangshin yang yamlin chetang yorwe.
What
Rangi dripa. Rangi dripa. Ningje dawo gomna.
Oh, indeed, isn't though. Because then the rang, Tam Kurwan Chamdur, Tarum Muntamel, Chamsari. Then they can the Nampo to Yana Yunkimadog, Arangara, Yangi, then Aran Yamnea or Chig dozam. But then you go on lady.
So he said, yeah, actually you can, because it is true, we ourselves are, have been helplessly under the power of our own obscurations and afflictive emotions, and we have wandered endlessly in cyclic existence. We have this ongoing stream of proliferating thoughts that keeps us bound. And so we can have compassion for ourselves. We can develop compassion for ourselves in the same way. So then fourth is, should the special ngundro be practiced in conjunction with inner and outer ngundro, so the accumulations have the power of bodhicitta? Wait, let me read that again. Should the special ngundro be practiced in conjunction? Yeah, okay. Dini di chebar ngundro yorwa jangchu jam ningje jangchu sim. Dini chi dang nangi ngundro pena denda lodo nambaji dang ngundro shimba ditso yorwa. Dini tumong dang tumong mayempa. Dini di so saya driba jangya ki chidure. Yena yang di ngundro ditso chebar ngundro dang nyamlin chena yapo rebe gain sena di.
Karnyamtu.
Pacher denda jangchu sem jam dang ningchi jangchu sem de ngundro shimba ditso nyamdu nyamlen chena digere gain sena ngundro shimba ditso yang denda jangchu sem gi nuba nang dang demba dawo chagamare.
Yeah.
Tinsome.
Jitang ngaranso lodo case gum shunarwa. Or the kun when let us jump simchi tin dongorwa. Or chancho simji go jamro simchi tin Tumo Kimondorwa, one Tumo on Lodoshe. Jitangazo then some the Nangema does a Jetan Sajin does in the new Dunta Scomia Lodore, or Tendruchi, or Jitan, that's all the social Juji Machera, Kechi Usedwa, Duntashi Jujenia using Machenia using it, what has it to two to marry, so the social Juji go Shorwa, or that's a Sajin does a good Dunta share Lodoshe, or the Jamro, Dan Tumo Kimondo Labora, to me Kimorona. Ta junde ina ta jamro tang dorsen mende la mene jo she yorwa wa tso ina tangbo nyamna chi bi ne khala tene nga zo changcho sem ji go shore changcho sem jamro tso yin je me go shore je ngo wa ti go shore kadina wa tse chi 我提起了，但切巴人工作现在多，我这当我做在上地，其实娘俩去呢，前年节做调查是光不吧？我这里的他可能切巴工作可能早下节，我让我做你贴是我难多，那咋个强求你不去计划在多啊？我那咋个的？我这咋我对真的。我昨天节呀，这上节小节出版了，做我这我这边浪漫一把，那把上节小节出版一把，我这了记呢，真的提起就别浪漫上面过的是，我这记都是这，他的讲述出现那一种悄悄他就记呢，我听到了这我就这他强求你不强求想。我唐不演了对吧？都配着哇，演了对吧？都配提起他在长卡啥过去的，这是长卡啥？我做人抢车的，俺提讲了抢车个的，我在长卡是我们这啥？我这就去个的，我因那他娘们看的那，他把总是新写那么多，他把总是那他不就是说审批他把写那个的，我这就是说审批他把这强求想过去的，你把我一些的，但我一明明他把写那个，我一些他娘们这样子去。结我话谈吧，是的，结我话谈，身边他们一动就给我做话都忙过去的。我提谈吧中不的，这些辛苦，人们看人那他妈辛苦去的是。我当我做可能去那他，我就挺认真我当个的是。
So. Kind of, because, of course, at the outset of our practice, we do generate bodhicitta, regardless of what practice we're doing. But then there's, these stages of practice that are done separately. So, for instance, at first, with the uncommon preliminaries, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, if you're doing this in retreat, at the beginning of each session, of course, you begin with refuge and bodhicitta. So you do generate bodhicitta at the outset, but then you really focus, on the 4 thoughts. And you do this, each week. You focus, or a certain number of weeks, depending on how you're doing it. You focus on each of these 4 thoughts until they really take root in the mind stream. And then, in 4 sessions. And then when you move on to the practice of the uncommon preliminaries, which are first refuge, Vajrasattva, Mandala, and Guru Yoga, where you're doing the accumulations for each of that. Again, in the beginning, you are reciting, the prayers of refuge and bodhicitta and inwardly generating those mind states. But you're focusing on each of those particular practices as you're doing them, which of course is infused with bodhicitta, but you're focusing in the way that it is that you're told to focus in terms of what the actual practice is. And then, at the end of the session, you also do the dedication each time. But then when you get to the special preliminaries, first you begin by meditating on love, and you do that for a week or a few weeks. And then you meditate on compassion, and you do that for a week or a few weeks. This is in retreat. And then when you get to bodhicitta, then you get to the accumulation part. So you're inwardly generating bodhicitta, and you're doing the visualization, mainly focusing on Buddha Shakyamuni, the Buddha, as your field of accumulation, or the main visualization, surrounded by all of the root and lineage lamas. And you do also the recitation of the 7 branches, and you're mainly accumulating the prayer that we also read in the prayer book regularly, which is, from now and until I attain enlightenment. I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of Bodhisattvas. So I'm forgetting it in English. Until awakening, I take No, got it? I take refuge in the Buddhas until attaining the essence of awakening. Likewise, I take refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. Just as the Buddhas of the past gave rise to bodhicitta and progressed along the Bodhisattva's path, so shall I give rise to bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings and practice the stages of the Bodhisattva's path. So that's what we recite again and again as we are prostrating while we're holding this visualization of the Buddha surrounded by the lineage lamas. And we do 100,000 prostrations as we recite that over and over. And so this is those are the stages of the practice itself. But of course, bodhicitta is infused in all of them because all Dharma practice, whatever it is that we do, is sealed with the three excellences. So there's the excellence of the pure motivation at the outset, which is bodhicitta. There's the excellence of non-distraction, or sometimes it's referred to as non-referentiality during the actual practice. And third, it is sealed with the perfect dedication in the end, or with the conclusion. So it is already part of it. So then the next one is, unfortunately, before becoming Buddhist, I rejoiced in people committing the 5 actions of immediate retribution. Is the karma created rejoicing as heavy as the karma created engaging in the action? What can I do to purify this? So midi kung nangpa macha negi ngunla dine same nga yorwa dine ditso yang Jesu yerang chebayin dine da pe juba chimbo yore yang di penale hansaya jigo chimbo yorwa dine di pena di same nga cheken dang Jesu yerang kin le chikpa dawa sagi yore
Leji pa zakh yore se chwa terebe
de de yang gari chetu gare de daya ki chitu de yang kong denda yena denin kong gari che de da ya ki chitu gari chetu gare
ta je sirang china ta jeta je sirang shou chimbo china gewa china nyam jipa no to gare la yoro te de kwa china zai chin de jipa to shou zi giro wa yina da zai ngo so so chi yo ma ro this time melism do ro yina tene zo de ta sen ro de ji tene da so so da da ha ko joba china ya kwa che jo ro wa de joba min ya kwa ta ma joba china ya kwa che ya or ya kwa ta gare dikpa ida zang nge tari la iwa gewa chen tari ismala re fit zong yoro dikpa ida zam na gewa chen ta garis de nyamla chi gor da so so be chang da si gya dong ya bo tong o ti kan to tong de nyamla chang cho sem to zi jiang chang cho sem to jiang yi gya dong tong de yang de nyamla kan to chi na de dikpa ta ro re zam do jo ba chi na ta nge ma ti yo sang ji jim den de ki tu la jaru mache cha se je yor la phyorwa o tene khona pa wa zi ro wa dik parwa khona pa wa zi ro wa jaru mache cha te khona pa wa te sukyan ning bo la bre sukyan ning bo te sanje kilo ma re jaru sukyan ning bo o te sanje kilo ma re la tene khona cha jun ba re te ndu te zire ten sami leka mambo charwa jele ko da jema te ko joba je yakwa chi de sanje ko de pa ta to gure zong yoro joba shou chenbo chi yakwa chi nyamna yakwa chi na yang de ta ro nyamna shou chenbo chi ta ro res
So, well, as they say, you know, if your rejoicing is very strong, then it is said that when it comes to virtue, you know, if you have really powerful mind of rejoicing, then you accumulate the same degree of virtue as the person who actually did the act, the virtuous act itself. So he thinks, yeah, actually, maybe it could be similar, or the same with non-virtue or negativity. However, you didn't actually do the deed, and so it's definitely a little bit better, and especially because you have the mind of remorse now. So everything really comes down to the mind. And so if you now have remorse, then you have the opportunity to purify the negativity. Without remorse, then there's no door to purification. There's no entry into the path of purification. Like remorse is kind of the first ingredient that is needed. And as Milarepa said, as he mentioned before, that the way, when the mind turns toward virtue, then that itself is what purifies the negativity. Or when the mind, by focusing on virtue, we purify negativities. And so, mainly to purify, to practice the methods of purification, giving rise to an altruistic mind, generating bodhicitta, practicing Vajrasattva, reciting the 100-syllable mantra with the 4 powers, as mentioned. And actually, there's the story of Gyaltsen. I can't remember. During the time of the Buddha, I want to say King Bimbisara. Anyway, I can't remember what the Sanskrit name is, but and he actually killed his father, or the Pawo Zukjin Ningbo, the Pawo Zukjin Ningbo, the Gyawo Matita la Seyurebe. Yeah, so he killed Gyawo Matita, killed his father Zukjin Ningbo, and who was actually an arhat. De Sanjay la Nuba Mambo Tang. And he also did a lot of harm to the Buddha, and accumulated just tremendously heavy negativities and karma. But later he ended up having remorse and confessed and really sought to purify these negativities. And the Buddha told him, that his negativities were purified. So he ended up like completely turning around through the power of the practice. Ajatasattu. Bimbisara. Thank you.
Oh, there is sosu joba yabochi, nyamla yabochi na tando. Sanje zong roate. Sanje. Techi tene tani ba de kare.
Yang char ta dung roya yorbe. Chizu chuni bacha yorba.
Da go samat nan diksa. Tinjo
Da dung roya yorbe.
Chusu kare.
Da ta chizu cha ma song.
Sinsa.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
So then we reached the end of the session, and we'll continue, with these questions. We didn't answer all the questions, so we can continue with them tomorrow. Re Chig ni sumje nga dun.
Yeah, that's Gyaltsen.
Yes. So tomorrow we still have 7 questions. We'll get to them tomorrow. Okay.
Chancho senjo rembo je ma je ba na je je ba nyan ba me ba ya go ne
to Moon for an announcement or two.